heard about various Japa retreats, the Japa Reform book, and various other things related to Japa in ISKCON. So His Grace Bhurijana Prabhu was one of the pioneers who was who wrote all these books, and he's very specific and is very adamant about how every devotee in ISKCON should have Japa. So, and it's said that one of the founding members of Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education was His Grace Bhurijana Prabhu. So he is a very renowned devotee, very sincere practitioner in devotional service. So we have a session about Srila Prabhupada remembrance. We had various Japa retreat sessions, but 30 minutes was just a brief introduction for him. So we just chose one lecture where he remembers Srila Prabhupada and his pastimes.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yes, Dakshangarshan Prabhu.
can you please make me co-host Sky Team?
Just a second, Prabhu. Ramlila Prabhuji, can you make Sky Team as co-host so that he can share the screen? Prabhuji, we have made the Sky Team as co-host. You can kindly share.
I was a university student at State University of New York at Buffalo, and there was the first time I actually saw Prabhupada was, I saw an interview when Prabhupada was being, not Prabhupada, but I think it was Ray Rama, was being interviewed on some television program, or perhaps it was Hayagriva. Then very soon, because the Mahamantra was so powerful, that was clear to me. So in any case, then when Prabhupada came back from Los Angeles, came back from his trip to India after his heart attack. He came to, after going to Los Angeles and perhaps San Francisco, he went to 26 Second Avenue, and Rupanuga sent me, and this was in the middle of the winter, to see Prabhupada with another student. And we hitchhiked from State University of New York in Buffalo up. We arrived there and took a train across town, and we arrived just when Prabhupada was beginning his class. So we walked into a room that was full of souls who were listening to Prabhupada, and my first had a few reactions, because one was that I had been listening to the Happening album over and over and over again, just turning it over and turning it over and turning it over, because I used to collect records, as so many of us did in those days, and Rupanuga had said, if you like listening to records, you can listen to the Hare Krishna records. So I said, how many are there? And he said, one. So somehow or another, I was satisfied just turning it over and turning it over and turning it over and listening to Prabhupada's words. So by the time I saw Prabhupada, I could understand his accent quite well. And my first reaction is he reminded me of my grandfather. He was so elderly, and then he was so powerful. I recognized that immediately. I don't remember anything specific from the lecture, but I remembered he was so powerful. I also remembered that I had this question in my mind before seeing Prabhupada, because I had a conception of what a perfect person was like. So I was wondering whether he was going to stop at a red light. It's a peculiar wonder, but when there was no traffic, does he follow all the rules like that? And then, so I saw that Prabhupada immediately, there was a red light, he looked both ways and just walked across the street, and immediately I understood that how practical Krishna consciousness was and how practical Prabhupada was. It was practical. He was theoretically and philosophically and spiritually fixed, but always feet on the ground and practical. He also said at that time that that he wanted to project a letter that someone had sent him. I don't remember the exact content of the letter, but he felt it very significant. So he wanted to use I guess an opaque projector to project it on the wall during that same meeting with a few people. And he said from now on, he told his servants that from now on we should always carry a projector with us. So I understood from that Prabhupada was certainly willing to use technology in the service of preaching. So I heard Prabhupada say in 26 Second Avenue, this was still in 1968. Yes, so I heard him say that two sort of handy phrases that really stuck in my mind that I found very practical. One is, if something is auspicious, do it immediately. And if something is inauspicious, put it off. So I use that all the time, still to this day, 50 years later. The other one was, something is better than nothing. So that one I forgot about. Now I'll start using it again. Something is better than nothing. It's such common sense. It's so practical that if someone can do something, it's certainly better than him doing nothing. So it's good to see the good also. That's really, now that I think about it, it's very helpful in dealing with each other. You could see the good in the person's attempt and in Krishna consciousness, especially the eternal value in something that someone has done. That reminds me of that story from 26 Second Avenue. I wasn't present there, but when the derelict in Australia, if you call him a bum, it means something quite different, but a derelict walked in to 26 Second Avenue with some toilet paper, and he said, "Here, this is for you." And then he was a dirty old fellow and reeked of alcohol, and he walked out, and Prabhupada said his spiritual life has begun. So something was certainly better than nothing. I remember one time in Melbourne, all the devotees were sitting together, and he was speaking to us in such a way that made us feel that we were all compassionate. We're doing such compassionate work, and he made us feel that we were deeply compassionate inside. But at least for myself, I was thinking, I don't have a drop of compassion in me, really. But he was speaking to that part of you that was the most sincere part of you, because he wanted that part to grow. I saw that very clearly as a teacher, and a very expert teacher. But an expert teacher he has more than one methodology in his repertoire, in his toolbox, so he knew when to use which you could say technique for the benefit of the person. Sometimes chess. Yes, because everyone did have such potential. And I'd say also in the beginning days, it was very more individualistic, his training of people. And then later on, because there were so many devotees, it wasn't and it was very few devotees had really personal contact with him, and could ask, and he didn't participate in their lives in a particularly personal way, but they only saw him when he came to the temple, and then generally only during the Bhagavatam class and the Bhagavad Gita class. But yet Prabhupada's potency was such that everyone felt that they had such a strong personal individual relationship with them. But one time in Melbourne, when only myself and Jagatrini Mataji and Tusta Krishna Swami were in the room with Prabhupada, it was right after he woke up after his afternoon nap, and he walked out, he sat down, and he said, "They write me so many letters, and they say, 'Dear Prabhupada, I am the most fallen, insignificant soul, and I have a great problem, a big problem.'" And then he just sort of laughed in a knowing, disappointed way, and he just said, "Just see." So it took me a long time to understand what was disappointing in that. And then after quite a while, I could understand that if you're an insignificant soul, and insignificant souls can't have great problems, you can only have an insignificant problem. So then Prabhupada responded to his own comment by saying that I wish I could train all my disciples personally, but what can I do? So I learned many things from that, and I think one was that I very much doubt that most of the devotees, myself included, could have handled the kind of intensity of training and with the full surrender required to be in the presence of someone like Prabhupada. Never mind like Prabhupada, to be in Prabhupada's presence, because you have to be in the presence of fire, you have to be fire yourself. You have to be fired up. You have to be able to see things from his point of view. So it was Krishna's arrangement in some senses. I saw that we didn't get as much personal association as we would have loved to have had, because it took so much surrender. But I also saw that we would have really, on the other hand, benefited from that personal touch and the personal adjustment to the individuals, the personal adjustment of the training to the individual and his capacity. And I saw that with him dealing with Jagatrini, my wife, one time when he told her in Fiji that Prabhupada wasn't politically correct. He didn't really consider that, but he said, "You should act as a maidservant of your husband." And she responded in a very clear-headed way that I wasn't trained in that way. And Prabhupada said, "But if something is better, you should accept it." So and that convinced her, just by that very personal and intimate instruction, that convinced her of a point that is so culturally non-relevant and against what the world is, the direction the world is going in nowadays. But it was his personal touch that really moved her heart. Well, in Hong Kong, it was a very difficult time. we were all alone for many, many years. And some of the devotees who came and visited us, the few devotees weren't, and they weren't sometimes they were a little eccentric or something like that. And then, so it was very, very difficult for us. And Hong Kong is, I'd say, the most materialistic city. And I'm from New York, and it was more intense and materialistic than New York. And it was very difficult. I don't want to go into all the difficulties that were there, but we were struggling. And Prabhupada, when he came and visited us in Hong Kong in 1974, he was very strong. And he was very strong, and he chastised me especially. And Zagatarini also was feeling that. So when I was with Prabhupada, I was in the room with Prabhupada in the Hong Kong Hilton. She was outside the door, and she didn't even want to come into Prabhupada's presence. And to some degree that sounds ununderstandable, but why wouldn't you want to be in Prabhupada's presence? But Prabhupada was Prabhupada. You know, he could be very, very, very strong too. And if you weren't ready for that presence, it was very, very difficult. So anyway, he asked me, how is your wife doing with this? You know, in a very, very personal way, because she had actually sacrificed so much to join the movement. He used to say that she sacrificed 3 things. She was an actress, she was okay, moving upward actress, and she gave that up, and she had gone to Hong Kong on his order, and third, that she had married me, which was, of course, an austerity, but that's a whole nother long story too. But she, it was an arranged marriage, and you know, the first day that we met, we were married. So that's so culturally impossible for someone brought up in the West, but she did it, and you know, after 50 years, we're still married, which is just Prabhupada's mercy in that. So in any case, he very much appreciated her, and so he asked me how my wife was doing. And I said, not very good. She was struggling. So he said, bring her in. Okay. So I brought her in, and then he just brought her in front of him. And he took off a ring from his finger, a gold ring, and gave it to her. And of course, she still has that. But this was a different Prabhupada than Prabhupada just sitting on the Vyasa-san, who most of the devotees had that relationship with him, and you know, the defender of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, you know, the Singha Guru sitting on the Vyasa-san, and but that was one aspect of Prabhupada. Prabhupada had many aspects. He was a person with so many aspects to him. His presence really helped her, obviously. You know, he was so, his presence gave us life. You know, not only us, but definitely us, but his presence was the life of the movement. You know, it was going on his presence. So she melted. I don't remember, you know, if she was more teary. I'm sure she was more teary than I am right now, remembering it, but you know, if she was sitting here next to me, you know, we'd need the towels, I'm sure. And she still has the ring, of course. You know, it's her life. And one time, in the middle of the night, fairly recently, she unconsciously took it off and couldn't find it. And the next morning, you know, it was, and then somehow I found it. So I was the hero. But that ring is, you know, it's the treasure of, I mean, what could you have more of a treasure than that? Because it's a gesture. It's a gesture of affection, of the person's affection, deep affection. So the two are mixed together and inseparable. And one time when he was talking, he just gazed out over the whole valley and spoke about the scientists, and that they have the power of their bomb to make all the leaves fall off, destroy the trees too, but make all the leaves fall off. But they're limited in power, and they don't have the power to refresh the tree and bring back its leaves. So he would speak like that, and he would speak about anything. One time, someone would come out with some fruit. His servant was Devananda at that time, and he would come out with some fruit for Prabhupada, and after Prabhupada, just only one or two people sometimes would be sitting there, and he would take some fruit, and then the servant would pass it around for us to take the remnants. So I had heard, I don't know where I heard it, but someone gave me some brilliant advice before I had arrived, that to eat the leftover of Prabhupada, such as an orange peel, was even better than just taking something off of his plate. So when Prabhupada saw that I had just taken the orange peel, there was no orange left, and I ate it, then he just looked at me and said, "It's digestible." It was just so funny, and it was so relaxed. And it was just so Prabhupada, how Prabhupada could be, the most serious acharya, and yet he could be just the most friendly of grandfathers, and just such a nice, such a wonderful person as well. So he was serious he was always serious, but not in a grave way always, although obviously he could be very grave. Another time in Vrindavan, when he was staying upstairs, when I first arrived, he called me upstairs, and one of the first things he said to me is, "Have you heard the tape?" And I said, "No." And then he put on the tape, and it was of a studio recording that they had sent him from Los Angeles. And Vishnujan was singing that Vandehan, and Prabhupada's playing the drum there, the mridanga, and later I found out that accompanying him and imitating Prabhupada's beat was another devotee from San Francisco named Jivananda, who I think lives in Dallas, or he had lived in Dallas years ago. And suddenly, I don't know how to describe it, practically speaking, the sound, he was just playing it from a tape recorder, but it was like the greatest sound surround atmosphere was created by that. And it was like the spiritual world opened up. It was so sweet, and we just started dancing. I think there was just two other devotees. I remember Arundhati was up there at that time, and we just started dancing. It was like the whole spiritual world had opened up. It was something, it was wonderful. One other time, I had given class on the Bhagavatam, and I still remember the verse, and it was very odd giving class, Bhagavatam class, knowing that Prabhupada was right upstairs and listening. But somehow or another, I wasn't especially nervous, because I didn't think he was really listening, but he was actually listening. And then at the end of the class, Devananda asked, I remember the content of the class, Devananda asked, because it was about Sukadev's conversion from being an impersonalist to a personalist by the mercy of Vyasadev's teaching in the Bhagavatam. So Devananda asked, was that perhaps Sukadev's personal preference, rather than explicitly meaning that personal was higher than impersonal? So of course, asking a question like that, we all ganged up on him, and everyone answered him and let him have it. And I gave my part too. I probably said something like, if you're an impersonalist, how could you have a personal preference, or something like that? But then right after the class, I went up to see Prabhupada in his room, and he said, "So they put the question to you, didn't they?" And I said, "Yes." And he laughed. And then Arundhati asked the question, why do impersonalists fall down? Why is it necessary that they fall down? Which was part of someone's answer, because that's what we had heard after all, it was 1968, so our depth of understanding wasn't so great. So she asked in a very sincere way, why do they fall down? Why do they always fall down? No, she asked, do impersonalists always fall down? And Prabhupada said yes. And then she asked, why? And then Prabhupada thought for a while. And it was like he was thinking, how can I explain this to these children? That's my later thought on it. He didn't give a philosophical answer. He was thinking, how can I explain it so they'd really understand it in a deep way? And then he thought for a while, and I don't know if I'm imagining he went like this, as he sometimes did, but and then he answered in such a simple way, because they get lonely. And there's a volume of philosophical import to that the nature of the soul is active, and we see it everywhere in the world, with every soul, from the birds to the dogs to the monkeys. Everyone gets lonely. And what will fill our loneliness is, of course, Prabhupada was saying, was Krishna. If we don't have that, even if we rise to the impersonal Brahman, the existential loneliness that plagues, emptiness that plagues everyone's heart just won't go until we have that relationship with Krishna developed. So there was a lot in that simple, he gets lonely. So Prabhupada was sitting in his upstairs room, and sometimes in the afternoons, devotees would come. Maybe this was in the morning, I don't remember exactly. But he was so relaxed again, and he was so peaceful inside and happy. And he said to the 4 or 5 devotees who were sitting there that the secret of Krishna consciousness is to arrange your life in such a way that you cannot forget Krishna for a moment. And then, and when you read Prabhupada's books, that's really the secret of Krishna consciousness. And Mahaprabhu said, Kirtaniya Siddhahari. And Prabhupada himself was always engaged, and it's just so hard to do if you're not a pure soul. This is my realization and reflection on it. You can make an intellectual adjustment and say, from now on, I'm only going to think about Krishna or like that. But when you're a conditioned soul, you just can't do it. You can't do it by intelligence. You have to do it by, if you have love for Krishna, it's natural. Premandina Charita Bhakti Vilochena. But, so he said it like this, but Prabhupada said it in a very practical way. He said, arrange your life in such a way. In other words, let your life be involved in Krishna's service. Everything should be somehow or another connected to Krishna, not have the duality of this is for Krishna and this is not for Krishna in your life. So it calls for depth of consciousness again. So after saying that, the secret of Krishna consciousness is to arrange your life in such a way that you cannot forget Krishna for a moment. Then he turned to Brahmananda Prabhu and he said, isn't that right, Brahmananda? And Brahmananda said, laughed and said, yes, it's not that hard, because he followed whatever the mood that Prabhupada had. And in fact, Brahmananda, many, many, many years later, told me that he said, when Prabhupada wanted someone to say yes, he called me. And when he wanted someone to think independently, he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Am I audible? Hare Krishna. Am I audible? Namo Vishnu. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakram. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna. Vedanta Swami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Bhakti Charanam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna.
They were looking at a map, and Prabhupada got down on the floor with him and was pointing out Tokyo and things like that. So Prabhupada had so many.
So we had there about Bhurijana Prabhu, how Bhurijana Prabhu was describing Srila Prabhupada's closeness. So here some short introduction about Bhurijana Prabhu, and I will share some pastimes or statements of Bhurijana Prabhu. Introduction. Bhurijana Prabhu is a distinguished disciple of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. He is renowned for his deep scholarship, teaching, and authorship within the Krishna conscious movement. Actually, here Prabhupada just mentioned that arrange your life in such a way that you will never forget Krishna in any way. That is Krishna consciousness. And His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu arranged in such a way his life that his life is a mission for Srila Prabhupada. And next, His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu joined ISKCON in 1960. He came across the teaching of Srila Prabhupada, leading to his profound interest in Krishna consciousness. In 1968, Bhurijan Prabhu's good wife is Jagatarani Mataji, and their marriage held on December 1970. Together, they established ISKCON's Spa Center in Hong Kong. Services and contribution of His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu. Preaching and teaching. Preaching and teaching is two different things. Preaching, one can preach to everyone. Jare dekho tare ko Krishna upadesh. But teaching is to a particular type of preaching. Just when we did our TTC course, then they teach us in such a way that teaching means to understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness very nicely, and preaching overally. In the year 1970, Bhurijan Prabhu, along with his good wife Jagatarani Mataji, established ISKCON's presence in Hong Kong, engaging in book distribution and preaching activities. He has been instrumental in teaching and guiding devotees, particularly in Vrindavan, India, where he has conducted in-depth seminar on sacred texts like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. You all know that in in Vrindavan, His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu gave 10 days seminar in every year for all India's devotees and all over the world. And Prabhuji is author of many books. Bhurijan Prabhu has authored several acclaimed books that develop into the philosophy and practices of Krishna consciousness, including My Glorious Spiritual Master, a memory detailing his personal experience with Srila Prabhupada. Actually, his Srila Prabhupada disciples are like jewels. Once a devotee comes to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Swami Thakur, and Bhakti Siddhanta Swami Thakur asked him that how much you know about Krishna consciousness. Then he said that I am the eternal servant of Krishna. Then Bhakti Siddhanta Swami Thakur sent him to wash the pot of Krishna. Then after some time he went away from the room. But the second devotee comes to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Swami Thakur, and same Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Swami Thakur asked him that what is your relationship with you, Krishna? Then he said that I am the servant of my Guru. Then Bhakti Siddhanta Swami Thakur said that I am very pleased to listen your audio. So for that reason, Srila Prabhupada, all disciples are remembering Srila Prabhupada every day, every moment. Their life is Srila Prabhupada mission. And his second book is Surrender Unto Me, an in-depth commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, unveiling his lotus feet and sights into the teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam. Many books are there. Educational initiatives. Prabhuji played a vital role in the development of VIHE, Vrindavan Institute of Higher Secondary Education, an institution dedicated to defending devotees' understanding of Vaishnava scriptures and practices. Now Prabhuji's teaching continues to teach and mentor devotees worldwide, offering seminar and courses that elucidate the profound teaching of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He remains active in writing, contributing articles and publications that inspire and educate the devotees community. Then once Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Rupanuga Prabhu that I am glad to know, I am glad to learn that Bhurijana is preaching to leave for North Carolina tomorrow. It is a very good attempt. I want to open hundreds of centers for preaching this Krishna consciousness, and one who helps me in this endeavor is certainly very dear to Krishna and all the acharyas. So Prabhupada's mood, one is word and one is mood. Here we can see what is Prabhupada's mood, and all the disciples, especially his Grace Bhurijana Prabhu, is trying his best to propagate the Krishna consciousness movement. Once a quote I have heard from one lecture about Bhurijana Prabhu. Bhurijana Prabhu stated that simply by regular attending Srimad Bhagavatam classes with faith, attention, and devotion, no other effort is needed to attract the mercy of the Lord. So Prabhupada emphasized these things very nicely, that one should faithfully and attentively hear Srimad Bhagavatam and hear the lecture and everything, so that our Guru Parampara is full of, they are full attentive to hear from their spiritual master. So we are seeking blessings from His great Bhurijana Prabhu that we may be attentive to our chanting, to our mission, to our Guru's instruction, and to wholeheartedly to dedicate our life to fully Krishna consciousness. Bhakti Prema Swami Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Sorry, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. So, yeah. So this is the dedication of Srila Prabhupada disciples. They are trying their best to propagate this Krishna conscious movement. We are the third generation who just want follow the instruction of our spiritual master and the whole parampara, that we can continue our life in dedicating Srila Prabhupada missions. That once, just I can share one pastimes about hearing, how one should hear Srila Prabhupada lecture and how one should hear all the lecture of Srila Prabhupada. That once Shyamanand Prabhu, Shyamanand Prabhu disciple is Rasikananda Prabhu. Rasikananda Prabhu in Odisha was giving lecture to his disciples. His disciples was a king, and he was giving lecture, and his disciples was a king. He was hearing, and at that time his minister come, and his minister just give some suggestions or something to the king. Then the king become inattentive. Just I was sharing this past times because here we had that His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu was emphasized to hear attentive Srimad Bhagavatam and everything. That Rasikanand Prabhu slapped the king. That king become behosh ho gaya. Then after some time the king come to the consciousness. Then Rasikananda Prabhu, and the king was crying very much, because that was the relationship between a disciple and the spiritual master. Because for a disciple only the spiritual master take the headache. Then Rasikananda Prabhu asked what happened. Then the king replied that, "Oh, my dear spiritual master, because of mine only you become disturbed." So that the mood of a disciple, that if someone will be not sincere to follow the parampara, to follow the Guru's instruction, then that will be the burden of the spiritual master. So the burden of the spiritual master is take home back to Godhead, all the conditions, all especially the disciples. So we are very grateful to our parampara. We are very grateful His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu. We are very grateful to Srila Prabhupada, that we are getting their mercy to become attentive and to become sincere to their lotus feet, and ultimately to Sri Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Krishna. Thank you very much. His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu ki, Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Bhakti Prema Swami Guru Maharaj ki.